Part 23. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanba. Chapter 221. Ksiddhagarbha once said that Bodhi can only be achieved when all sentient beings are saved. If the hell is not empty, you will never become a Buddha. And it was such a righteous God who actually committed the scandal of sacrificing human souls and raising evil spirits. What happened in the lightless alley must not be known to the world, otherwise Ksiddhagarbha Bodhisattva's great reputation will be ruined in one day. Diting looked at the city god coldly and said word by word, "Is it possible that you still want to cause another bloody storm here?" After hearing this sentence, I became even more convinced that this was an ancient battlefield. Could it be that a large-scale melee between underworld soldiers really broke out in the underworld? The city god shook his head and said, "In the last battle, the underworld suffered heavy losses. I don't want to stir up trouble, but if you want to touch my successor, I won't agree. Even if I spend all my Tianfu city god today, I will take him with you. Go out." The city god said these words with confidence, as if he firmly believed that he would take me away from here today. When Di heard that the city god was so determined, he said nothing and raised his right hand high. The next moment, the Yin soldiers behind Diting made an attack stance. Once his hand falls, these evil soldiers will attack immediately. When the city god saw this scene, there was no change in his face. He was still watching and listening with a smile. Just as Diting's right hand was about to fall, a familiar voice sounded in the darkness. "Stop." The next moment, Su Tianqian walked out of the darkness. The moment she came out, Diting's expression changed dramatically. Su Tianqian came to me, staring at me with beautiful eyes, and after confirming that I was safe, he breathed a long sigh of relief. "Fortunately, nothing happened to you." Then, he turned to look at Titing, his red lips parted slightly, and said, "I have already met Ksiddhagarbha, and he asked me to bring you a message." Diting was slightly startled and asked, "What are you talking about?" Su Tianqian stretched out her green-white fingers, and a golden light appeared on her fingertips. Then the golden light floated in front of Diting. After a while, Tingting's expression softened a little. Since Ksiddhagarbha has said so, there is no reason to continue the stalemate here. Diting looked at Su Tianqian and said word for word, "Don't forget what you promised Ksiddhagarbha." Su Tianqian nodded lightly and replied, "I, Su Tianqian, never break my words." Diting looked at me, then waved to me, motioning for me to come to him. I glanced at Su Tianqian and she said, "Go ahead." I came to Tingting. Tingting stretched out her hand and gently covered my forehead. The next moment, my vision went dark, and when I regained my vision, I was already in a large hall. The main hall is simple and brilliant, and a person sits quietly on the lotus seat. The man holds a human-headed banner in his left hand, has a nectar seal on his right hand, wears a crown, heavenly clothes and necklaces, and looks like a heavenly being, surrounded by a faint light of Buddha. Seeing this scene, 5 words came to my mind. Ksiddhagarbha Bodhisattva. Are you Lusu? Before Ksiddhagarbha Bodhisattva could speak, his voice came to my ears. The voice was full of awe-inspiring righteousness, majestic and awe-inspiring. That's right. Ksiddhagarbha looked at me and said slowly, "Do you know why I cultivated the god of void death?" I answered without thinking, "It's for the magical weapon underground in Tianfu city." That's right. Ksiddhagarbha nodded and continued to ask, "Then do you know why I want to get this magic weapon?" Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanba. Chapter 222. I shook my head. Ksiddhagarbha explained, "That magic weapon is too powerful. Only in my hands can the balance of this world be maintained. I will never become a Buddha until hell is empty. But now that I have that magic weapon, I can fulfill my lifelong wish." I looked at Ksiddhagarbha and said nothing. Although this reason seems very reasonable, it contains Ksiddhagarbha's great ambition. There is no distinction between good and bad instruments. It is the person who uses it who positions it. Giving the magic weapon to Ksatigarba will indeed make the best use of it. However, if you want to obtain that magic weapon, you must destroy the Feng Shui Bureau of Tianfu City. Once the Feng Shui is broken, life will definitely be ruined. Is this what a righteous god should do? Ksatigarba Bodhisattva seemed to have seen through my inner thoughts, and his bell-like voice rang in my ears again. Sometimes, the necessary sacrifices are worth it to achieve the goal. He slowly stretched out his hand to me. My child, for the sake of the common people in this world, are you willing to help me gather the 5 great evil spirits and obtain the magic weapon? Yes, another olive branch. I don't have the lofty ambition to save the common people. Everything I do is to survive. The 5 evil spirits must be firmly in my hands. Only in this way can the plan of the evil star be crushed and I can survive. However, what puzzles me is that during the process of snatching the god of void death, the double-faced Buddha of good and evil never appeared from the beginning to the end. I looked at Ksatigarba Bodhisattva, nodded, and said, I do. For now, that's all I can say. If you refuse, the consequences will be disastrous. Ksatigarba will most likely get me out of here, but what happens after that? It is an unwise choice to be an enemy of such a powerful being. Ksatigarba Bodhisattva smiled at me, then the darkness shattered and truth appeared in front of me. Diting looked at me deeply, then turned around and left here with 50,000 yin soldiers. I returned to Su Tianxian, thinking a lot. Su Tianxian said to me, let's go. I nodded, and just as I was about to take a step forward, the city god stopped me. Boy, don't forget your agreement with me. I looked back and said, I won't forget it. In this way, the city god left the underworld with the yin soldiers. And Su Tianxian and I also embarked on the road back to the underworld. We returned along the original route, passing Nehi Bridge, followed by Huangquan Road. On the road to Huangquan, I couldn't help but ask, Master, everyone wants to get that magic weapon, what should we do? Su Tianxian hesitated and replied, let nature take its course. Returning the evil star to the palace is what you have to face. There is no need for you to participate in the disputes in the underworld. This trip made me see how terrifying the gods are. They are not as decent as we imagined. Whether they are the city god or Ksatigarba Bodhisattva, they all have their own goals and ambitions. I asked, Master, will there be disputes in the underworld? Su Tianxian looked at me deeply and made a move that surprised me. She stretched out her hand, put it gently on my head, then stroked it gently, and said softly, there are many forces in this world, whether it is the underworld or the world of the sun, these forces are fighting openly and secretly, and there are constant disputes. Moreover, now the underworld is no longer the underworld it once was. I was confused when I heard this sentence. I opened my mouth and wanted to ask, but Su Tianxian had already turned and left. Helpless, I could only follow behind her. After walking out of the gate of hell, we returned to the Yin-Yang Inn again. At this moment, the sky turned white. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanba. Chapter 223. Su Tianxian and I were walking on the way here. The early morning dew wetted the vegetation on both sides, and my trousers were soaked while walking on the path. Just when Su Tianxian and I were about to walk out of the woods, a young man walked towards us. The young man was wearing a navy blue robe and carrying an old canvas bag. Whenever the young man in the robe took steps, there would be a crisp clanging sound. What made me even more surprised was that the young man in the robe there were bright kitchen knives tied under the canvas bag. Su Tianxian and I stopped at the same time. The young man in robe walked straight past me. When Su Tianxian saw that the other person did not speak, he took another step. I quickly followed, but every few steps I heard the voice of a young man in a robe behind me, etc. I turned around in confusion and saw a young man in a robe walking straight towards me. The young man in a robe untied a tied kitchen knife from under his bag and stuck it on the ground. He said to me, "In 3 days, if 2 of your relatives encounter a certain death situation, you can take this kitchen knife and go to the city center. Come find me at the Angzan Hotel. Remember, it only counts if you go to me with a kitchen knife. That is my proof of collecting money." After that, the young man in the robe turned around and left without looking back, leaving only the bright kitchen knife stuck on the ground. 2 relatives? Isn't this just trying to be blind? The only family I have now is my third uncle. I looked at the back of the robed young man leaving and said to myself, what a weirdo. Su Tianxian looked at the kitchen knife on the ground and began to count with her right hand. With the winter solstice in her hand, Su Tianxian's beautiful eyebrows slowly wrinkled. After a while, Su Tianxian said to me, "Put the kitchen knife away, we have met a knife dealer. Credit knife person." I was a little surprised. Knife loaner, this title represents a profession, and it is also the most mysterious organization in folklore. However, as time goes by, they gradually fade out of people's sight. Knife creditors have always existed in the world, and you may see them in a corner or on the streets. There is often a small stall in front of them with a variety of old-fashioned kitchen knives and scissors. Of course, there will be some people walking among the people, carrying a few kitchen knives on their backs, and when they encounter interesting people or things, they will leave behind a mysterious and incomprehensible prophecy. According to legend, the originator of knife creditors was the famous Goigozi. I pulled out the kitchen knife, put it away and moved on with Su Tianxian. "Master, why did he say that I have 2 relatives?" Su Tianxian glanced at me and said, "You will know, and what he said will come true. Then you just go to him with a kitchen knife." I thought about it and said, "Master, can't you help me figure out what kind of fatal situation my third uncle will encounter, so that I can find him in advance?" Su Tianxian's divination skills are unrivaled, and it is not an exaggeration to say that he is a living god. If my third uncle is really going to suffer some hardship, then I must help him. I can't just watch my last relative leave me. No. Su Tianxian shook his head and said, "There are some things that I can't see through. Even if I can see through them, I won't say anything. As for the people who borrow swords, it's different. They have a unique method of divination and prophecy, which I can't figure out. But they can figure it out." Su Tianxian pondered for a moment and said, "This can be regarded as your fate with him. It is God's will that you 2 meet. If I intervene, I will cut off the opportunity between you and him." I nodded in understanding. As for the prophecy that the young man said, let's wait and see in 3 days. Soon, Su Tianxian and I returned to Jiyuntang. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 224. Seeing that I was back safely, Xia 11 took off her makeup. She came to me, hesitated and said, "Lu Su, I have something to say to you." I was slightly stunned, and Xia 11 and I came to the door. She lowered her eyes, not daring to look at me, and refused to speak. I asked, "If you have anything to say, just say it." After hearing this, Xia 11 raised her eyes, bit her red lips, and said in an inaudible voice, "A large part of the reason why I chose to inherit the painting is because of you." "Because I?" I looked at Xia 11 in confusion. "Why would you say so?" Because. Xia 11 stuttered for a long time before she managed to squeeze out a complete sentence, "Because I know you will face a lot of difficulties in the future, so I want to inherit this skill and help you when you need it." After hearing this sentence, I was filled with emotion, opened my mouth, and just said thank you. I originally wanted to persuade Xia 11 to give up her craft of skin painting and live a normal life. But with Xia 11's character, she wouldn't agree even if I told her. Although Xia 11 has a gentle and intellectual personality, I know that she is stubborn at heart and sometimes shows a strong woman's side. Otherwise, he wouldn't have scolded Wang Lin at the wedding. Xia 11 raised her head, raised the corners of her mouth and eyebrows unconsciously, and said, "No. You're welcome." After saying this, Xia 11 turned and left. Looking at Xia 11's leaving figure, I sighed slightly. I turned around and returned to Ji Yuntang, took out my cell phone and called my third uncle. The phone was connected, and Uncle San's familiar voice came from over there. Our uncle and nephew first exchanged pleasantries, and then I said, "Third uncle, if you encounter any unsolvable difficulties in the past 3 days, you must contact me in time." After hearing this, the third uncle cursed and said, "You stinky boy. Do you just look down on your third uncle so much? Don't worry, your third uncle has a hard life." After that, he hung up the phone. Listening to the beeping busy tone on the phone, the corner of my mouth twitched slightly. My third uncle's temper was still so explosive. I found a mirror and looked at my right eye carefully. My right eye has returned to normal and is no longer as dark and scary as before. Seeing this, Su Tianqian said, "You can rest assured that your right eye will no longer be blind, but you must be careful not to use the power of your right eye casually. If you must use it, then you must accumulate more merit. This way, if you do this, the pain of the evil spirit coming back when you use it will be reduced." I nodded, put down the mirror in my hand, and asked, "Master, are you hungry? I'll cook for you." Su Tianqian was slightly startled. By coincidence, her stomach started to growl at this juncture. I just caught the flash of embarrassment in her plain eyes. "Fine." I smiled at Su Tianqian and walked into the kitchen. After eating, I caught up on my sleep. When night fell, Hua Xiu actually walked out of the room. She walked straight out of Ji Yuntang. I was curious about what she was going to do, so I followed her quietly. She was seen standing outside Ji Yun Hall, looking up at the stars in the sky. The street lights on the roadside stretched her shadow, making her look extremely lonely. Hua Xiu stared at the night sky in a daze for a long time, and finally murmured to himself, "Is this God's will?" After she said this, she turned around and saw me. Hua Xiu's face turned cold and he walked straight past me. I hesitated for a moment, stopped her and said, "If you have anything, you can talk to me and I can help you." Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 225. Hua Xiu's face froze, he said coldly that there was no need, and then returned to his room. Time passed quietly, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In the past 3 days, I called my third uncle almost every day to ask if he had any trouble. The third uncle was so annoyed by my phone calls that he said, "If I call again, he will block me." From the third uncle's tone, it seemed that he had not encountered any trouble. Could it be that the prophecy of the credit knife failed? As night fell, the originally clear night sky suddenly became covered with dark clouds, and there was a strong possibility that a mountain rain was about to come, and the wind filled the building. Su Tianqian was sitting at the Eight Immortals table reading a book, while I was drawing ghost notes. Looking at the pile of ghost money stacked up on the table, I stretched. These ghost money should be enough for Xiangyi to spend a while, right? I looked at the time and saw that it was already 10:30. I said to Su Tianqian, who was reading a book, "Master, it's getting late. Let's go to bed early." Su Tianqian hummed softly. Just when I turned around and wanted to leave, Su Tianqian suddenly stopped me. She closed the book and said to me, "Tonight, pay more attention to Hua Xiu." After Su Tianqian mentioned this, I remembered that I had not seen her for 3 days. I nodded. Returning to the bedroom on the second floor, I lay on the bed and couldn't sleep. It was about 12:30 when I heard the sound of the door opening in the corridor outside. I put on my shoes, opened the door, and saw that the door to Hwashiu's room was wide open. Where did Hwashiu go? I started looking for Hwashiu in the entire Ji-Yuntang hall, but in the end I searched the entire Ji-Yuntang hall but couldn't find her. The uneasiness in my heart became more and more intense. At this time, it suddenly occurred to me that I had not found the rooftop yet. Thinking of this, I hurriedly ran towards the rooftop. As soon as I got to the rooftop, a gust of wind blew in my face, which made me unable to open my eyes. I stretched out my palm to block some of the strong wind, and I vaguely saw Hwashiu standing on the rooftop, looking up at the night sky. Suddenly, a thunder resounded across the sky and the earth, followed by lightning that tore the night sky apart and hovered over Ji-Yuntang. I walked towards Hwashiu, looked at her back and shouted, "What are you doing here? It's going to rain. Go back to the house quickly." Hwashiu turned her head and looked at me quietly with a pair of beautiful eyes. She lightly opened her red lips and said, "I'll stay here for a while and I'll go back later." For some reason, the coldness in Hwashiu's usual words disappeared completely. I continued to shout at her, "Then you go back to the house early." Hwashiu hummed softly. I turned around and walked off the rooftop. The wind was so strong tonight that it made my head feel dizzy. Su Tianxian asked me to pay more attention to Hwashiu tonight, but what danger can Hwashiu pose? She is a 1,000-year-old zombie. Zombies are not among the 5 elements in the 3 realms and 6 realms. Because they are immortal, and immortal, they are abandoned by the 3 realms of heaven, earth, and man, outside the 6 realms of living beings, wandering and homeless. And very powerful zombies are naturally intolerable and will be punished by heaven and earth. This is the tribulation, and zombies will have to suffer the baptism of thunder from the sky. At this moment, the rumble of thunder sounded in my ears again. The sudden thunder made me tremble subconsciously. Etc. I seemed to have overlooked something. 1,000-year zombies. The thunder that transcends the calamity. I trembled all over and ran towards the rooftop quickly. When I came to the rooftop again, the scene in front of me made me break into a cold sweat. I saw dark clouds in the night sky, bursts of thunder, flashes of thunder and lightning, and the dull thunder seemed to be brewing a huge disaster. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanba. Chapter 226. I looked up at the night sky. Thunder and lightning as thick as a bucket shredded the night sky, as if blue pythons were coiled in the night sky and could fall down at any time. Hwashiu, I ran towards Hwashiu. Hwashiu turned around suddenly and said to me, "Don't come over. All of this is what I should experience." I stopped walking and looked at Hwashiu not far away. Hwashiu's long skirt was fluttering in the wind, and her fair hair covered her fair cheeks. She looked at me quietly without saying a word. The way she looked at me was complicated, full of resentment, entanglement, and reluctance. But in the end, all the emotions turned into a kind of open-mindedness, a look that was willing to die. She smiled at me and whispered, "Being able to see you again is considered a blessing from God. No matter what happened in the previous life, but in this life, you are still my brother after all." When I heard the word brother, I felt like my whole heart was hit hard. Hwashiu is my sister? Who was I in my last life? At this moment, I finally know what my feelings for Hwashiu are, and that is family affection. This kind of feeling will not disappear with the cycle of time and destiny, nor will it decrease with the changes of time. The prophecy given to me by the person who borrowed the knife did not come true. The person who was really in trouble was not Uncle San, but Hwashiu. She smiled at me, her red lips parted slightly, but she made no sound. but I could tell by lip reading that she was saying goodbye to me. Hwashiu, I looked at the thunder hovering in the sky, feeling anxious inside. I rushed towards Hwashiu regardless. That is, at the moment I took steps, I had already pinched the seal of the 9 layers of Thunder Ju. As soon as the seal was formed, the thunder hovering in the sky struck towards Hwashiu. My expression condensed, and I silently recited the 9 layers of thunder technique in my heart. In the palm of my hand, lightning flashes echoed with the thunder in the sky. Lei Mang, who was supposed to hit Hwashiu, separated part of it and struck towards Hwashiu. Looking at the sky thunder hitting me, I was horrified. If such a powerful sky thunder hit me, I would definitely end up in a state of shock. When Hwashiu saw this scene, he looked shocked and ran towards me. However, the 2 thunderbolts fell down with lightning speed. At the critical moment, I activated the ability of my right eye. A dark barrier enveloped me. With a bang, Lei Mang struck the barrier hard, and I could clearly feel the frightening power. Immediately afterwards, the black barrier could not withstand such a powerful thunder, and its surface was crumbling at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally collapsed. My eyes were filled with blue sky thunder, and there was only rumbling thunder in my ears. The next moment, I lost consciousness in an instant. When I woke up again, I was in my room. My limbs felt weak, and every cell in my body was wailing in pain. A warm and greasy hand gently held my hands, and then Su Tianxuan's voice came. "Do not move." I looked to my side and saw Su Tianxuan's beautiful eyebrows furrowed and her expression very serious. "Master." Su Tianxian shook his head slightly at me, and then I felt a warm current spread from my hands to my whole body, and the pain in my body was gradually disappearing. After a while, the pain in my body subsided so much that it was almost negligible. But Su Tianxuan's face turned extremely pale. I struggled to sit up and asked anxiously, "Master, how is Hwashiu?" Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 227. Su Tianxian opened his mouth, but no words came out. She let out a long sigh and said, "That's all, come with me." I struggled out of bed, my feet went weak and I almost fell to the ground. Seeing this, Su Tianxian quickly helped me. Afterwards, Su Tianxian took me to the soul coffin. Hwashiu lay quietly in the soul-crushing coffin, her eyebrows furrowed and her expression in pain. It seemed that the thunder just now also caused a lot of damage to her. Seeing Hwashiu like this, I suddenly became anxious. I quickly grabbed Su Tianxuan's hand and asked in a panic, "Master, Hwashiu?" Su Tianxian gently covered my hand with her slender white hand, and then rubbed it gently. "She's fine, just a little injured." Hearing this, I breathed a long sigh of relief. Su Tianxian continued, "I had expected that Hwashiu would suffer this calamity before, but I didn't expect it to come so quickly." I looked at the sleeping Hwashiu and asked, "Has she passed this catastrophe?" Su Tianxian shook his head and said, "No, 1,000-year zombies are not allowed by nature. One disaster is not enough, there will be at least one more. If it hadn't been for you in this disaster, Hwashiu would probably have died." Thinking of the powerful thunder just now, I felt a little scared. If it happened again, how could Hwashiu be able to withstand it? Then, is there any way to solve it? Su Tianxian pondered for a moment, then looked at me and said word by word, "The knife loner." I originally thought that the prophecy of the creditor had failed, but I didn't expect that it would actually come true for Hwashiu. "Master, is Hwashiu really my sister?" Su Tianxian looked at me quietly, her lips slightly opened, wanting to say something, but she didn't. She let out a long sigh and said, "That's all, it doesn't hurt to tell you. You and Hwashiu are indeed brother and sister. Hwashiu is a zombie and will live forever. You have gone through many reincarnations and your memory of her has long since disappeared, but this cannot deny the fact that she is your sister. No wonder I felt an inexplicable sense of intimacy when I first met Hwashiu. It turns out that she is really my sister from my previous life. Reincarnation is really mysterious and cannot be explained in just a few words. But this kind of bond that exists in the heart does not need to be explained. While Su Tianxian and I were talking, Hwashiu slowly opened her eyes. She looked around blankly and focused on me. She sighed deeply and whispered, "Fortunately, nothing happened to you." Hearing the movement on Hwashiu's side, I trembled all over, looked at Hwashiu, and asked with concern, "How are you?" Hwashiu shook his head, and then he was about to sit up. When I saw this, I helped him up. Hwashiu looked at me, then at Su Tianxian, and said, "Master Tianxian, I have decided to leave here." Before Su Tianxian could answer, I said firmly, "No. You are not allowed to go anywhere. If you leave here, what will happen next time the thunder hits?" Hwashiu looked at me in surprise. After a moment, he lowered his eyes and murmured to himself, "I can handle my own affairs." Seeing Hwashiu like this, I felt a surge of anger in my heart for no reason. "What's your business, my business? I told you, you're not allowed to go anywhere." When Hwashiu saw that I was angry, she stopped talking and lowered her head. At this moment, she really looked like a sister who was scolded by her brother. Su Tianxian said, "Even if you leave Lu Su, the cause and effect between you and him will not be severed, and fate will still let you meet again. Also, Lu Su is right. Your matter is his matter. It is just a natural disaster. There is always a way to resolve it." Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanbao. Chapter 228. After listening to Su Tianxuan's words, Hwashiu compromised. I found the kitchen knife left by the credit card holder, and then I went to the Angzan Hotel to find him. Just as I was going out, Hwashiu stopped me and asked to go with me. I took a look at the sunny weather outside and said, "You'd better stay here." Hwashiu said nothing, just stood in front of me and looked at me quietly. Seeing her like this, I sighed helplessly and said, "Then you go with me." Hwashiu walked beside me holding the red oil paper umbrella. The damage caused by the thunder to Hwashiu was so great that she now walks a little unsteadily. Hwashiu's appearance instantly attracted the attention of pedestrians on both sides of the road. She was wearing a mist blue flowing fairy dress, with a flowing silk satin tied around her slender waist, and 3,000 black silk pieces falling behind her like a waterfall. Hwashiu's skin was fair and her face was astonishing, as if she had stepped out of a painting of a beautiful lady. Ancient costumes are indeed a bit out of place now, but in today's society there are many people wearing ancient costumes. Hwashiu looked at the tall buildings standing on both sides of the road, his brows full of surprise and curiosity. I saw this and explained patiently. Times have passed and the world has undergone earth-shaking changes. It is no longer the ancient times. Technology is developing and people's lives are getting better and better. Hwashiu looked at me doubtfully and asked, "What is technology?" I raised a wry smile on my lips and patiently explained to her. Hwashiu was also listening carefully. Finally, she said, "You used to take me shopping like this, but since you became the emperor, everything has changed." After hearing this, I smiled and said, "At least I'm by your side now." Hwashiu raised his eyes, with a little sparkle in his eyes. Soon, we arrived at the Angzan Hotel. I happened to see a young man in a robe walking out with a canvas bag on his back, cursing as he walked. When I walked up to the hotel, I found out that he was complaining about the hotel. He had agreed to check out at 12 o'clock, but he was kicked out at 11:30. The young man in the robe turned his head and saw me. He was slightly startled, then smiled, and said, "Here he comes." I nodded and opened a new room for the young man in robe. Later, Hwashiu, a young man in a robe, sat on the sofa in the hotel. The young man in robe asked, Have you brought the kitchen knife? I nodded, took out the kitchen knife from my backpack and put it on the table. Seeing this, the young man in robe put away the kitchen knife, then smiled and stretched out his hand to me and said, "Hello, my name is Zhang Xi." I also stretched out my hand, shook it with Zhang Xi, and said, "My name is Lu Su." Zhang Xi put his eyes on Hua Xiu and asked, "If I guess correctly, this is your relative, right?" "That's right." When the young man in the robe heard my answer, he smacked his lips and said, "Interesting, a zombie is actually your sister." I took advantage of the situation and asked, "Since you can accurately predict what will happen to my sister, there must be a way to resolve it, right?" The young man in the robe chuckled and said, Yes, but I'm a little hungry now." The corner of my mouth twitched slightly, and I quickly took out my phone and ordered a takeaway for the young man in the robe. The takeout was delivered soon. Zhang Shi ate happily and said after eating, it was a pity that there was no wine. He wiped his mouth with his hand and said, "Of course there is a way, but you have to go somewhere with me." "Where?" Zhang Shi slowly spit out two words. "Xiangzi." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qingnian Wanba. Chapter 229. When it comes to Xiangzi, everyone has very different thoughts. But what came to my mind was the word exorcism. My grandfather once told me that a corpse chaser is a mage wearing a Taoist robe who makes a profession by guiding corpses to walk with a special kind of witchcraft. When driving away corpses, they led the way in front of the corpse instead of behind it. They beat gongs as they walked to avoid night walkers, and those who had dogs locked up their dogs. When there are more than one corpse, they are connected with straw ropes, one every 6 or 7 feet. When walking at night, the corpses were all wearing tall felt hats, with several pieces of yellow paper with talismans drawn on their foreheads hanging down on their faces. This scene can also be seen in some movies. But to solve Hua Xiu's matter, why go to Xiangzi? Zhang Shi seemed to have seen through what I was thinking, and he explained, there are many corpse chasers in western Hunan, and there are many zombies that are hundreds of years old. When the zombies reach a certain stage, the corpse chasers will naturally have strategies to deal with them. If nothing goes wrong, we can find a zombie that is about to suffer a natural disaster, so that we can share the thunder for your sister. I suddenly understood, stood up quickly, and said to Zhang Shi, without further delay, let's set off immediately. Zhang Shi waved his hand and told me not to worry. He said to me, as a 1,000-year-old zombie, if your sister leaves for Xiangzi, she will definitely be worried about by some people with ulterior motives. Before going, you should find a way to save her. Covering up the corpse energy on your sister can also reduce unnecessary trouble. There are many ways to cover up corpse aura, but I can't do them all, so I have to find Su Tianxian and let her take action. I nodded and was about to leave with Hua Xiu, but at this moment, Zhang Shi suddenly stopped me and said to me with a smile, "Say hello to Grandpa Lu for me." My steps stagnated and I turned back to look at Zhang Shi. I opened my mouth and said in a low mood, "My grandfather has." Although the words were not finished, Zhang Shi already understood. He lowered his eyes, feeling a little sad. After a while, he raised his head and asked, "When did it happen?" I replied, "Some time ago." After Zhang Shi heard my words, his body couldn't help but tremble, and his eyes were filled with a little mist. He nodded and said, "Okay, I understand." After that, he stood up, came to me, stretched out his hand and patted my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely help you get your sister through this difficult time. After all, if it weren't for Grandpa Lu, I would be very miserable. He may have died, but it was he who led me to the path of being a credit card holder. I will never forget his great kindness in my life." When my grandfather was young, he was a traveling Taoist priest, so it was reasonable to help Zhang Xi. There are many professions on both sides of the yin and yang. Who is willing to enter this bizarre world? Okay, I get it. After that, I took Huaxiu and left. But when I reached out to close the door, I heard Zhang Xi's sobs coming from inside the room. My heart trembled and I had so many thoughts. After leaving the hotel, Huaxiu and I returned to Jiyuntang. I told Su Tianxian what had just happened, and Su Tianxian nodded. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 230. This is the only way right now. She looked at me and said, I originally planned to take you to find the second one after snatching the god of void death, but now it seems there is no need for this. There was something in Su Tianxuan's words, so I asked, why do you say that? She thought for a while and replied, this trip will allow you to meet another evil spirit. Although the order is wrong, it doesn't hurt. Su Tianxian told me before that if you want to break the Feng Shui formation in Tianfu City, you must gather the 5 great evil spirits. When these 5 great evil spirits appear, the order of sacrifices is particular. Now that the god of void death has appeared, the next step will be the defeat of the 10 evils, followed by the Giluan evil, the 4 wastes, and Hongluan Tiangzi. The 5 great gods must be included in the 5 god tokens in this order. I nodded. Su Tianxian stood up, came to Huaxiu and said, follow me. Huaxiu followed Su Tianxian to the 2nd floor. About 30 minutes later, 1 person and 1 corpse walked down from the 2nd floor. When I looked at Huaxiu, I found that all the corpse aura on her body had disappeared, and the cold air on her body had also been reduced. Now, except for her fair skin, Huaxiu looks like a normal person. But that's nothing. White skin is nothing special. I have covered up the corpse energy on Huaxiu's body, but it didn't last long, about 3 days. In other words, I have to go to Xiangzi within these 3 days, and I have to resolve the matter of Huaxiu within these 3 days. I nodded and said, okay, master, let's go. Su Tianxian shook his head and said softly, this time, I won't go with you. Ah. Why? Su Tianxian looked at me deeply and said, I want to go where the 10 evils were defeated. I was speechless for a moment, but Su Tianxian would always put my affairs first no matter what time it was. Sometimes I wonder why Su Tianxian is so nice to me. Is it just because of Grandpa's instructions? I raised my head, opened my mouth, and said, Master, please pay attention to safety. The corners of Su Tianxuan's mouth rose slightly. Although the amplitude was not large, it could already be seen that she was smiling. She nodded. Just when I was about to walk out of the Jiyuntang gate with Huaxiu, Su Tianxuan's voice came from behind me. Lu Su, don't be rash when things happen, and stay calm at all times. I'll be waiting for you at home. I froze, turned around, and nodded heavily to Su Tianxian. Don't know when it started. Su Tianxuan's cold temperament changed me, and Jiyuntang became my home unknowingly. After Huaxiu and I left Jiyuntang, we went straight to the Angzhen Hotel. When I knocked on Zhang Xi's door, he had already packed up and was waiting for me. Tianfu City is some distance from Xiangzi, so you have to take a train. Zhang Xi first checked in his kitchen knives, and then I, Huaxiu, and Zhang Xi went to Western Hunan together. When the train pulled into the station, Huaxiu held an oil paper umbrella, pointed at the roaring train, and asked with some surprise, what kind of monster is this? The next moment, the passengers waiting for the bus looked at Huaxiu strangely. I smiled helplessly, and then explained it to Huaxiu. Huaxiu was even more surprised after hearing this. She said, in my time, there was no such convenient means of transportation. If you wanted to travel far, you had to take a carriage. I looked at Huaxiu. At this moment, Her expression was both excited and curious. She was like an inexperienced little girl, full of curiosity about everything. There are many things in this world that you haven't seen before. I will accompany you to see them later. Huashiu looked at me with some surprise, but then thought of something, lowered his eyes and said nothing. The train pulled into the station and we set foot on the road to Xiangzi.